research focuses on the economics of science and innovation, with a special focus on gender issues. And she has extensively published on several leading journals, such as Research Policy and Journal of Economic Behavior and Organization. And today she's going to present the paper, What Matters in Funding, the Value of Research Coherence and Alignment in Evaluators Decisions. Since I think all of us are more or less involved in the selection process for fundraising, I do expect a very interesting presentation, fruitful discussion. As usual, let me recap the rule of the game. Fabiana, you have 1 hour to present your paper. For attendees, please mute your microphone and let Fabiana have a smooth presentation. So if you have spot questions and brief clarification, raise your hands. And for all the other questions, we'll have a long space for a discussion just after the presentation. And I'm in charge to collect questions for those who attend the webinar here, while I think Alessandro will collect questions for those who are going to follow our live streaming on the official GSSI YouTube channel. And last but not least, I'd like to inform you that the webinar will be recorded. So those of you who prefer not to be recorded can leave Zoom and follow the webinar on the GSSI YouTube channel. I think I said all we need. Fabiana, thank you once again for accepting our invitation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Alessandro, for the introduction. Okay, share the screen. And thank you to Sandro and Alessandra for the invitation, and to all the organizing committee. It is my great pleasure to be here virtually at Gran Sasso Science Institute. And as I was mentioning before, I really hope to have the occasion to be personally there as soon as possible. First of all, I have to say that I really like the label of the series of events that you're organizing. Research doesn't stop. We are all basically working behind the screen since since 1 full year, and this is the spirit that we should maintain. So today, the work that I'm going to present is shared work with Charles Ayubi, Sandra Barboso, and Michele Pezzoni. I think that some of you already know some of my teammates, but just to give you a short background of our team, Charles and Michele started to work with me since my time at EPFL. So I was at EPFL before joining UNU-MERIT 2 years ago. Now Charles has completed his PhD and he's postdoc at Harvard, and Michele is associate professor at in Nice, at the University of Nice. Sandra is working at the Sloan Foundation. The Sloan Foundation is the foundation, the US foundation, that provided us the data for the project, and thanks to them, our project was possible. So the idea of our project is to understand what matters in funding. And specifically, we intend to focus on 2 elements. The value of research coherence and alignment in evaluators' decision. Why did we start our project? Basically, the large majority of the existing studies explore the effect of receiving a grant in science. While there are few studies that investigate how scientists can access to those funding opportunity. So how scientists are selected for being awarded a grant. And as we all can understand, this is a very critical. This is a very critical phase for all of us. In fact, we are realizing that we are more and more dependent on funding. Scientists need substantial funding to produce scientists and to support their lab. Among the few studies that scholars have done on the selection phase, some of those studies analyze how scientists' profile affect the success rate in being awarded. And in particular, there are some work that consider personal characteristics like the gender or the scientific profile in terms of bibliometric indicators. So this on one side. On the other side, more recent literature analyze the content of the project that scientists submit for the evaluation. And for instance, there is a quite recent work by Bourdreau and his team that considering the degree of the degree of novelty of a project, or more recently, other study consider how the proposal is written, and they relate the project content to the probability of being awarded. But as we can understand, scientist profile and project content are not two separate entities, two separate dimensions. It is important to consider both dimensions together and to see how those two dimensions together affect selection. Using an expression, I think that this expression will summarize this concept. No project is an island, in the sense that the same project conducted by two actors with different history and different context might lead to different results. So it is important to consider the project in relation to the science history and to the context. So our research question is the following one. How do the project coherence with the scientist past history and alignment with the scientific context affect the selection? So this schema, let's say, summarize, give a snapshot of what we are doing in our project. Let's consider the first part. So the coherence between the project presented and the scientist history. I would say that there are no a priori on the relationship between coherence and selection. For projects submitted to be selected, being coherent with the science history, on one side, prove expertise subjects and show the willingness to establish an identity. Let's consider my case. I have dedicated a large part of my previous research in studying economics of science subjects. I present a project on economics of science. So this project is coherent with my history. So on one side, I'm proving to the reviewer that I have expertise to conclude the project. But it might signal also a lack of flexibility, let's say in being stuck in the comfort zone. I have investigated for 5 years thematic in the economics of science, for instance, related to the gender gap. I present a project in, again, in economic of science. So this might give a signal of lack of flexibility on my side. Of course, in being coherent, time matters because knowledge capital accumulation depreciates over time. If I have studies the gender gap in science 5 years ago, and then I stop, and I present today a project, it is different that having continuously investigated gender gap issue and presenting today a project in the topic. So the second, so far we have seen this part. Now let's move on the alignment part. So how does alignment affect selection? So we consider the alignment with the scientific context. So with topics that are of interest of the scientific community when the project is submitted. And also in this case, there are no a priori on the directionality of the relationship between being aligned with the context and receiving the funding. So being aligned with the context on one side prove the willingness to propose trending subjects for the scientific community. Again, going back to the previous example, gender gap issue, the existence of gender gap issue and the investigation of the determinant behind gender gap issue are, let's say, trendy subjects. So if I propose today a project on these subjects, I prove, yes, my willingness to be aligned with this trend. But this might also signal a lack of originality in investigating subjects already exploited, in the sense that, okay, gender gap issue is a so-called hot topic, but there are tons of studies on that. And also in this dimension, so in being aligned, time matters because subjects became obsolete. So, and the value of alignment decays over time as new scientific subjects take over the existing ones. So these are this is our research question. So investigating the relationship between alignment and coherence on the probability of being awarded. And in terms of empirical setting, as mentioned at the beginning, we are considering the Sloan Research Fellowship program. So those fellowships are granted by the Sloan Research Foundation. The Sloan Research Foundation is a private foundation based in New York. And those kind of fellowships are very prestigious. And basically, they provide economical support for 2 years, and they sponsor early stage scientists. So usually to apply, you need to have obtained your PhD not more than 6 years before. And this fellowship is is intended to support US and Canadian scientists. So in tenure track. So the idea is to support scientists with a unique potential to make a substantial contribution to their field and to guide them through the tenured, to obtain a tenured position. With usually with the money that they receive from this fellowship, scientists support in part their teaching loan, and also they can buy equipment, especially if they need equipment for their lab. And through the collaboration with Sloan Foundation, we were able to gather important information. So first of all, we obtain information about all the applicants. This is quite a unique opportunity for us. In fact, we got access to the application package, not only of the winner, but also of the non-winner. So we have access to all applicants package. And the applicants package include one-page research statement. So basically, the candidate, they have to state in one page what their plan for the following 2 years. So for us, this research statement represents the project. And in terms of content, this research statement include what the researchers are planning to do in the next 2 years. Then we collected all the publications of those applicants before the application. And from these publication records, we were able to reconstruct the scientist history. Then we missed one part of our of this schema, the scientific context. And to consider the scientific context, we retrieved information about the topics that appeared in 2 generalist journals, Science and Nature. I have also to say that we consider Science and Nature as representative generalist journals in the field, because we are focusing our analysis on the STEM fields. So here the typical research statement. So one page, a couple of paragraphs dedicated to summarize the previous work of the scientist, but just let's say a few lines, and then the rest dedicated to the future work. So my future research will be some data, some descriptives about our study sample. So our study sample included about 2,500 research statements, so application packages. We focused our attention on STEM field. So we include computational and evolutionary molecular biology, chemistry, neuroscience, ocean sciences, and physics. So the applications are almost equally distributed across fields, with the exception of physics. So the large majority of our applicants are in physics. And this is why also in few moments we will I will show you that we did a separate analysis for those physicists. We consider all the application submitted between 2015 and 2019. So we have a 5 year of observation. Overall, we have 2011 distinct scientists. So the difference between the number of scientists and the number of application packages and research statements denote the fact that some scientists applied multiple times, and in some cases, in the same year, the scientist applied to more than one field. This is not common, but it is possible. And the average application success rate over the years is about 16%. So this is a very prestigious fellowship, and the success rate is quite low, but as we can see, stable across years. So basically, scientists applied, and then they are evaluated by a commission of experts. Usually, this commission is composed by 4 or 5 members in the field. And the final decision is taken by the foundation. The novelty also of our work is how we extracted information about coherence and alignment. So basically, we extracted this information by comparing text. And in particular, to measure the coherence between the project and the scientific history, we compare the research statement as a text with all the publication of the scientist before the application. So we have to consider that those applicants are young scholars. You can apply at the latest 6 years after your PhD. So in terms of publication records, let's say that on average, those publications go back 10 years before the application, because it is the time of the PhD plus the time soon after the PhD and before the application. And to measure the alignment between the scientific context and the project, basically we compare the research statement with all the articles that appeared in 2 generalist journals, Nature and Science. To implement this text comparison, we implement the so-called word-to-vec algorithm. And this algorithm allows to transform words into vectors. This is an example where here we have the research statement. And applying the word-to-vec algorithm, we were able to position each word in a vectorial space. In this case, to have a graphical representation, we consider 2 dimensions. In our exercise, we consider 100 dimensions. And so once all the words have been represented into the vectorial space, each document has been summarized in one unique, let's say, dot, that is the centroid, this green dot. So once we have summarized all this large set of information in one unique dot, we were able to compute the distance and so the similarity between documents. Here, again, the example where we consider the distance between the research statement, so the green dot, with one paper published before the application time. So we consider, for us, the distance is computed in terms of cosine similarity. I would like to share with you one example, considering one of the representative applicant. Let's consider the case of Lisa, this representative applicant. So in this vectorial space, in this graph, we have represented with the green dot Lisa publication, and while the green dot represent her research statement. We fixed a threshold, and and in this case, we say that, okay, Lisa's research statement is coherent with 5 previous publications, because in terms of distance, there are 5 publications among all the others that are above this threshold. We consider also the time dimension. And in the case of Lisa, the research statement has the highest coherence with an article published almost 2 years and a half before the application. This article is the one with the closest level of similarity. Here, I'm showing you the plot, the distribution of all the coherence or the similarity score that we obtain comparing the research statement with all the applicants' publication. So overall, we consider our 2,500 research statement compared with all the publication of our applicant. The pool of our publication is about 52,500 publication. I will show you in a while the descriptive, but on average, our applicant before the application published 27 articles. Those score range, the score of similarity range between -1 and +1, with +1 is the max. So if the score is 1, it means that the documents are identical. This is the distribution, and as we can see in the plot, although the left-skewed distribution shows the tendency to propose a research project similar to past publication, there is a wide range of similarity values that show that it is not always the case. So some of the applicants submit a proposal that is not similar at all, so is not coherent at all with the project. What about the alignment? So again, here we are comparing tests. And in this case, to measure the alignment, we are comparing the research statement, our green dot, with all the papers that appeared in Nature and Science before the application time. Specifically, we consider the pool of articles that appears in Nature and Science starting from 2010. Again, here we have all the article, and we consider that LISA research statement is aligned if there is at least one paper that has a degree of similarity above the threshold appeared in Nature and Science. In this case, LISA research statement is aligned with 8 papers appeared in Nature and Science. And again, also in this case, we consider the temporal dimension. And in the case of LISA, the research statement has the highest alignment with an article published almost 13 years before the application. So basically, again, LISA is presenting a proposal that is aligned with some of the topics that are treated by nature, that are of interest of Nature and Science. Here, the distribution of the similarity scores. And here, essentially, we are comparing each research statement with all the articles appeared in Nature and Science. We consider the paper published in Nature and Science starting from 2000. So we consider all the pairs, and overall we have 72 million similarity score, because each time we are doing this pairing. And so as we can see in this picture, the distribution is right skewed, showing that articles in Nature and Science have frequently low levels of similarity with the research statement. This is in a certain sense natural, because we are comparing all the research, we are pairing research statement and articles, and regardless of the topic. So is it, let's say, natural that the distribution ended up with this shape? These are the descriptive of our sample. So on our on the whole sample, in 66% of the cases, the research statement is coherent with the scientist profile. And in 63% of the cases, there is coherence between, there is alignment between the research statement and the topic treated in Science and Nature. Here we are comparing with a simple t-test what is happening in the population of awarded and non-awarded. And from these basic statistics and basic t-test exercise, we can see that without any control, the reviewers, the evaluators, are slightly in favor of research, of receiving, granting research proposals that are coherent and aligned. In terms of model, we are estimating a logit model where we are considering the probability of being awarded as a function of being coherent and aligned. And plus, we consider the time dimension with the addition of interaction term with the time. Then we have a detailed control for the scientist bibliographic characteristics. We consider if the scientist is specialized or not. And we consider also the other information that are contained in our application package. In particular, we consider the quality of the referee letters, looking at the quality of the supporters, their affiliation. And then we consider also the quality of the 2 representative articles that are included in the package. Each applicant is asked to pick up 2 representative articles. And so we consider the quality of those articles looking at the citation received. Then we consider the application length and if the applicant mentioned some eligibility exception. As I mentioned to you, each applicant can apply if he obtain his or her PhD max 6 years before the application. But there might be some exception for extension of this, for an extension of this period. And those exceptions usually are related to family reason, so having kids. If you have kids, you can obtain an exception, and these are the main reason. And so we take in consideration this element. So here, other descriptive to give you a snapshot of our sample. So the average age is 35 years. 1/3 of our sample is represented by female. 1/3 of our applicants are currently based in a top 20 US or Canadian university, and 50% of our applicants obtain their PhD in a top university. On average, at the application time, as I mentioned you before, they have 27 publications. Also, here we consider the quality of the referees, and in the majority of the cases, the referee came from a top university. One important control is the so-called career specialization. So basically, we consider how similar are the publication of the applicants. So basically, going back to my example, we consider all my publication before my application, and we consider the average similarity among those publications to see the degree of specialization. Here I reported to you a matrix where we are doing this exercise. So basically, we are considering all the publication before the application. In this case, the applicant had 14 publications, and we compare each publication in pair, and then we average the score. And here it is interesting to notice that in terms of similarity for this applicant, we can clearly distinguish the PhD period when the applicant published a core of a paper with a high similarity score, 0.92, 0.87. Then this applicant started to do something different, but he consolidated again later in her career in a specific topic. So it was interesting also to see how scientists, it was interesting to see also the distribution of similarity across the career, along the career of an applicant, and to see that for the majority of those applicants, there is a core of article that derive for the PhD time when articles are very coherent. And if we think also at what we do, also in our experience, we can say that, yes, this is what is going to happen. So our first results. So considering the whole population, so to pulling together all the applicants, we can see that being aligned matter. So there is a premium in submitting a project that is aligned with the scientific context, so with the so-called trending topic. And but the value of being aligned decrease over time. We can see that by the negative sign of the coefficient of the interaction term. And specifically, an applicant with a research statement aligned with an article published 12 years before the application date has the same chances to be awarded as an applicant with a non-aligned research statement. So if you are aligned, but if you are aligned with, let's say, old topic, obsolete topic, this the benefit basically disappear. In terms of other, and it is important to notice that being coherent, if we consider the entire sample, has no significant impact on the probability of being awarded. Interesting, talking about gender gap, we see that a positive sign for the dummy female to indicate that in the case of this particular fellowship, being a female has increased. The female tend to receive, tend to have greater chance to receive the grant. It is the same case, it is the same for being affiliated with a top 20 university. And as expected, also the publication records quality counts. In effect, there is a positive sign of the control citation. So having a greater number of citation increase your probability of obtaining the grant. Here a plot that show how the average, that show the fact that the average scientist predicted the probability of being awarded with respect to the time passed since the most aligned publication to the research statement decrease over time. So to show you the obsolescence effect. So those results relate to the full sample. But as I mentioned to you before, there is a particular discipline, physics, that is the group of our applicant, the largest group. And physics is not only the largest group, but physics is a discipline that where scientists have a slightly different behavior respect to scientists in other disciplines. In particular, in physics, scientists tend to publish more, so a greater number of papers, and scientists tend also to work in a larger team.
Fabiana,
yes.
Sorry if I interrupt you, but it happened to me to notice that there's a question in the chat.
Sure.
I don't know whether it's, sort of sport and dedicated kind of question. So would you mind if I ask the person to pose their question?
Sure, sure.
Mariana, are you still there? Yes, and are you entitled to talk? It should be the case or not? No, you can't. No, because you, I don't think I can. You should, because you are a panelist. But anyhow, would you like to pose your question? Is it a dedicated one so that we don't interrupt flow, or is it general?
Hi, I can now talk. I can see. Actually, I can wait till the end. I have a couple of questions, so I just wanted to understand the rules, because I probably missed the beginning. So sorry to interrupt you, Fabiana.
No, you're more than welcome. I have to say that I prefer to be interrupted, because otherwise it's a sort of monologue.
Yeah, that's true. So let's make a break. No, I actually was wondering if the measure that you call career specialization is a kind of proxy for what you at the beginning called flexibility.
Okay, this is a good question. When I was mentioning flexibility at the beginning, I was referring to, let's say, a possible interpretation. So when I was mentioning flexibility at the beginning, I was more in general referring to how an applicant can be perceived by the evaluators. And I was referring to the comparison between the project content and his own previous history. So basically, I was referring to this part when the comparison is between the project and what the applicant did in the past.
Yeah.
Specialization refer only to it's not anymore a comparison between the project and the previous scientist history, but it wanted to be a measure that consider only the scientist history. So let's consider an example. So let's consider my publication track. In my publication track, I have articles in economics of science. So I'm coherent if I present a project in economic of science. I'm specialized if in my career I have done mainly economic of science.
Yeah. Yeah, this answers perfectly the question. So let's say you don't actually have a proxy of flexibility, let's say. I'm just asking because what you said at the beginning about the trade-off between being coherent over time, but also the risk of a kind of entropy. So lack of flexibility can actually be an issue for the research productivity of individuals.
I do not have, the short answer is that I do not have a proxy for flexibility.
Okay.
Yes,
no,
we can, yeah.
Right.
That's super interesting. So I didn't mean to.
No, but thank you for the question.
Even because at the end I realized that career specialization is not significant, if I'm not wrong, right?
Exactly, and I have to say that we were not expecting this because there is a general trend to say that you have to stay focused.
Yeah, definitely. That's why.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I would expect, actually.
Yeah, we were expecting the same. And career specialization, let me double check. Okay. Career specialization is even with a negative sign when we split the field between life science, chemistry, and physics.
Well, that's very interesting.
Right. Sorry if I took the role of a chairperson, but it seems that Alessandro Palma has some problems with his connection. So while we wait that he retake the control of the situation, I will act as a chair, and then therefore, yeah, Fabiana, please go ahead. So I would suggest to the audience that unless we do add spotlight and dedicated question, we keep discussion towards the end. Okay. So please, Fabiana, go ahead. Thanks a lot.
No, thank you so much. So yes, we were discussing about differences across discipline. So physicists are in a certain sense different with respect to other scientists in STEM, not only in terms of output, because usually they publish more, but also in terms of organizational behavior in producing science. And specifically, they tend to work in a bigger team. Here, when we compare the dimension of the team, we can see that in physics, the average number of authors per publication that we use as a proxy of team size is greater than 11. While in the other discipline, teams are smaller. And so the question is, this might impact also on the factors that are considered by evaluators when screening application. And the answer was yes. So in life science and chemistry, being coherent and also being aligned increase the chance to being awarded. In this case, there is a time effect for both the dimensions, so coherence and aligned, and being aligned. But let's say that on average, evaluators appreciate the fact that applicants submit a proposal that is coherent with the previous history. Under the hypothesis that in this let's say, if those applicants submit a proposal that is coherent with what they did in the past, they are showing the ability to efficiently conclude their project. So they prove that they have the right skill. In physics, this is not the case. And in physics, we observe that the selection committee positively evaluates the time passed since a scientist's most coherent article with the proposed research statement. Specifically, the probability of being selected increased by 0.99% points for each additional year elapsed. So if, let's say, you are an applicant in physics, the evaluators appreciate the fact that you propose something that is coherent with your past work. And here, among us, and then I am more than happy to open the discussion at the end to discuss possible interpretation. Our interpretation is the following one. So basically, we realize that in physics, evaluators do not care much about the content of the research proposal compared to what you did in the past, compared to what you did, and compare to the topic of general interest. And but they give more value to your simple CV. So, for instance, they give value to the quality of your previous publication. Why this might be the case? In our opinion, there is evaluators find very challenging to evaluate the content of physicist publication, because for them it is difficult to identify the contribution of each individual scientist. Because they work in team. So the average publication has 11 co-authors. So which is the contribution of each of those authors? It is very difficult to say that. And also in terms why they do not consider also the alignment with topics of general interest for the scientific community, because usually physicists work in lab. So the decision about the topic in which they are working is not an individual decision, it's a collective decision. So yeah, the interpretation of our result was related to the nature of the topic, and also to the behavior of physicists with respect to other scientists. So in physics, evaluators consider basically your CV and the quality, the average, the standard bibliometric indicator, so the citation that you have received. But it's very difficult for the evaluators to take in consideration the content of the proposal. So then we conduct several robustness checks. We include controls for evaluators' intellectual closeness. So basically, we consider the similarity between the work conducted by the evaluators and the work conducted by the proponent. As I mentioned to you at the beginning, proponents, applicants are evaluated by expert in the field. But we had a control to check how similar the work of the evaluator was with respect to the proponent. Then we replace the dummy. So far, I've shown you regressions where coherence and alignment as considered as dummy. We replace those dummy with a continuous variable. Then we consider an interaction term between coherence and alignment. And we implemented sensitivity analysis for the threshold level of coherence and alignment. We test different threshold, and we construct also threshold by discipline. Among those robustness check, I would like to share with you the one that consider the interaction between being coherent and being aligned. So we constructed several categories. So as reference category, we have a scientist that is neither aligned nor coherent. And then we have the other three categories that are non-aligned and coherent, non-coherent and aligned, and coherent and aligned. And what we realize is that overall, the premium is for those scientists that are simultaneously coherent and aligned. So if you are coherent and aligned, you have about you increase your probability to obtain the grant. This result, again, is mainly due to the sample of scientists in life science and chemistry, while it doesn't count for physicists. So our take-home methods and also, let's say, tips for young scientists. So our take-home methods are the following one. So when you apply, be coherent with your most recent research. And here I'm reporting a quote by an article titled 10 Simple Rules for Getting Grants. One of these rules is convince the reviewer that you have the technical and scientific background to perform the work as proposed. So let's say, try to be as much coherent as you can. Be aligned with the current topics of general interest. So be novel, but not too novel. So try to align with the trending topic. There are discipline specificities and norms that affect coherence and alignment impact. If you are a physics, there are no topic constraints, but try to recall what you did in the past. So far, those results regard scientists, so regard our community. But I would say that this selection story apply also to the business case and to other fields. And here I'm reporting the case of SpaceX and Elon Musk. SpaceX is the startup that is aiming to reduce the cost to travel in the space with the idea of reaching Mars. And Elon Musk launched this startup in 2002. And at the beginning, this startup, for this startup was really challenging to receive funds by investors. And here I'm reporting a quote by Elon Musk. Ironically, with my track record, I could have gotten funding for almost any business except rockets. Elon Musk at that time had experience in the software industry with PayPal and Zip2, but any experience in space, in the space, let's say, construction. And so for him, he was not coherent. So this project was not coherent with what he was doing in the past. And for this reason, basically investors were not trusting in his ability to work in the field. And at the same time, at that time in 2002, the idea was also not aligned with trendy investments. In fact, in those years, at the beginning of in 2002, NASA experienced cuts in the budget. So there were no interest by the public for space travel. So this is just to report a story that well matches our story in economic of science in our community, but to show that our result have implication also in other field. So that's it for my presentation, and now I'm open to take question. I would like to thank you, MBR, for the support, because MBR gave us, we received a small grant by MBR that when traveling was possible, allowed us to travel to the States and to collect data. We thank also Sloan Foundation, and of course there is a disclaimer that our results do not represent the Sloan Foundation views, and errors remain on us. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that Alessandro, did you manage to recap?
Yeah. I can be on charge. Thank you very much, Sandro, for taking my place. So I had some problems with my connection, but it seems now it is working. So thank you, Fabiana, for this super interesting presentation. And I would start our discussion. So I'm going to start to collect questions. So please go ahead.
Now I stop the sharing of my screen so I can see all your face.
Yeah.
And again, Alessandro, may I simply remind you that we should try to get the say priority to PhD students. This is sort of rule.
Sure. So
we have a number of PhD students among us. So if they want to start posing questions, they are more than welcome. Sorry for that. I'm going to shut down.
So please don't be shy.
Can be also simple curiosity linked to your experience.
Okay, so let me start to ask you something about some quite technical issue. Or are there any other questions? Oh, Masood.
Yes. Masood?
Yeah, thank you very much for your interesting presentation. I have also, I looked at the regressions that you have done. It seems that, top 20 universities that you're currently working, and top 20 universities that you have got your PhD matters more than anything that you've mentioned control for. Have you tried to drop these two and see whether other variables make sense or not? And I'm sure that if we are referring to top 20 universities, it's mostly US-based or UK-based universities. So it's very polarized sector, let's say, or collection of universities. So my curiosity is very much referring to that aspects, because, you know, citation, the quality of publication, you know, whether you have published in the top 10 or journals, I think that should matter a lot than, you know, than university. But anyway, just that's a curiosity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Masood, for your question. Yes, you're right. So I'm going back to my regression result. And if we look at the magnitude of our coefficient, the magnitude of the coefficient being affiliated to a top 20 university is high in the full sample. Is also let me double check, and is also particularly high when we consider when we split the discipline, and is particularly high in life science and chemistry. I have to admit that we didn't run a regression where we include only the control first, and then we had our determinants after. What we did was the reverse. So we ran the regression with our main explanatory variable, and then we had the control to check for the impact. Yeah, so what we are, your suggestion is good, and we are going to see what is going to happen. I would say that you are right. There is a sort of, so those kind of fellowships are addressed for really top scientists. And in terms of applicant, if we look at the statistics, let's say that 1/3 of our applicants came from a top university. And looking at the t-test, you are fully right, because the number of awards it's awarded without any control is much higher for a top university. Of course, this so the fact that there is a sort of reinforcing loop in being from a top university, being able to publish in top journal and be awarded with a prestigious grant like this. So, of course, there is a large debate in our community about this reinforcing loop. And it's very also difficult to distinguish the selection effect from, let's say, the simple reputation effect. So it's very difficult to say, okay, I'm a better quality scientist, so I got access to Stanford, then I'm in Stanford and I can publish in management science or review of economic statistics. So this is, I would say, an open question for our community. So thank you for your really good question, and we will run. I'm curious now to run a set of regression where we do the other exercise. So we consider this control first, and then we add the rest.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Fabiana. Now, Carlo has a question. Please, Carlo.
Thank you, Alessandro. Thank you, Fabiana. I'm sorry, I have a terribly weak connection, so I hope to be able to pose my question. My question is not a technical one on the model you propose, but it's just, let's say, a concern as a young PhD students, let's say at least an early career PhD student. So the point is that if according to you, so what we call interdisciplinarity in a way is something that could be seen as a limit instead of a kind of strength of a young or not young researcher in the end.
Okay, so thank you, Carlo, for the question. This is also related to the question posed by Marianna before. First, I have to clarify one thing. So interdisciplinarity, so you can be interdisciplinary and propose a coherent project if your project matched one of the topics that you studied in the past. And I have also to say that if you have been interdisciplinary in the past, by sort of construction is also easier to be coherent, because if you in the past you have explored 10 topics, then you propose a project, it is easier that you propose a project coherent with what you did in the past. On this side, interdisciplinary might favor your application success, in the sense that if you are in the interdisciplinary in the past and then you pick one of the topics that you have studied in the project, you show your ability to deal with the topic. As Marianna noticed before, we found that being specialized do not give a plus in the probability of obtaining the grant. I have to say that our result relate to a specific kind of fellow. Is a US fellow, is a very prestigious fellow, and is addressed to scholars that are in tenure track. So it might be the case that this kind of fellowship status is not always general for all kind of grants. And one of the things that I would like to investigate, for instance, is the value of interdisciplinarity in the probability of obtaining a job. So far, there are the studies that I know show that it's not so easy to jump from one discipline to another one, because especially nowadays, because there is the so-called burden of knowledge effect. So nowadays, I would say that we tend to specialize because it's more and more difficult to deal with multiple topics simultaneously, because the frontier of knowledge for each topic is becoming higher and higher. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
I don't know if I reply you with other question or with a clear reply.
Actually, half and a half, but
Yeah,
I'm satisfied. Thank you very much.
Okay, now there is Andrea. Andrea has a question, and then maybe there's some comment from Marianne.
Yes. Hello, Marce. Thank you for the presentation. I don't know this fellowship, but maybe you said before. So I was thinking that some fellowship or scholarship have a quota for different, I don't know, for developing country, by gender, by race. They don't say explicitly, but if you see the result, they are half from one country apart from another. I don't know if you control for this. And the result about gender, I was thinking that maybe you did it, but it would be also interesting seeing the interaction between, for example, gender and past education or university. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea, for the question. So, short answer, in this kind of grants, there are no quota. Let's say that there are quota across disciplines, in the sense that there is a fixed number of fellowship by discipline. So they cannot provide in a specific year all the fellowship to physics or to ocean science. Usually there is a fixed number of fellowship per field, but they have no quota regardless gender and race. Your suggestion, thank you for the suggestion. What we could do is to run a separate set of regression by gender to see if the factors count the same across gender. And for instance, in one of my recent work, where I'm analyzing gender and career, I'm realizing that by gender there are some differences on the determinant. For instance, I don't know, I found that publication count more for the promotion if you are a male, while being the head of a department count more if you are a female. I think that it would be really interesting to do our regression by gender. So because it might be that there is some heterogeneity. So we will do that. Interesting, there is some recent work that can be interesting for us, is the fact that there are some studies that consider the gender impact of on the probability of obtaining a grant. And in one recent study, scholars, Donna Ginter found that a lot depend on the way we write the grant. So usually, for instance, female tend to use a different kind of wording. And once we have control for this kind of wording, the gender bias disappears. So just to give you some hints on gender studies.
Okay, I think Marianne would like to add comments.
I can wait till the other PhD students, so no problem with me. I can wait till the end, Alessandro, but thank you anyway.
Okay, thank you, Mariana. So let's skip to Leonardo. Leonardo, please.
Yeah, hi, Fabiana, and thanks for the presentation.
Hi, Leonardo.
My question is mainly a curiosity, actually. So in slide 12, you mentioned the word to vector. So I would like if you can expand a little bit on how you use it to, if I got it well, you applied it to analyze the some sort of information, the abstracts that you have in text content. So is it similar to the content analysis, if you know, maybe, or maybe you, I don't know, it's just, I'm curious about the algorithm.
Yeah, thank you, Leonardo. So it's an algorithm that allow you to do to analyze text, and with respect to other algorithm, for instance, I'm familiar with the topic analysis. The advantage of this algorithm is that it allows you to consider this first of all, to summarize a large amount of information, because at the end of the day, we were able to summarize the content of one full abstract in, let's say, 1 point. And the fact that you can extract a vectorial representation of, you can have a vectorial representation of each word, allows us to identify distances across among tests. This is something that you cannot do with the topic analysis, because, for instance, the topic analysis allow you to extract topics, but then you have several topics and you do not know how similar they are among each other. This kind of algorithm can be trained according to the test that you have to analyze. For instance, we consider the stem fields. So we trained the algorithm in terms of vocabulary with all the abstract that appeared in Nature and Science. So I would say that it has some advantages with respect to other technique, and it's quite used. It started to be used in the community. So also for the implementation, you can find R packages already predefined, basically.
Thanks.
Okay, so
sorry, Alessandro, can I abuse of my role of pseudo chair to ask a very related question on that?
Yes, Sandro.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm not really confident with this technique, but I was wondering, these factors that you basically identify by basically making the text analysis of Nature and Science, are they orthogonal among them or not really?
What do you mean by your?
They are somehow independent, or if they can share somehow aspects among them. I mean, with the topics that you identify, right, with respect to which then you check the alignment, right? Are really independent among them? Is there sort of sharing of aspects of words?
Each word is can be positioned in a space.
Right.
And then you consider the distance among vectors, basically. Right. I don't know if I completely get. So your questions related to the fact that some words are synonymous, for instance.
the question originates from a general concern that is, all right, you identify the context in terms of topics, right? So that's the idea, and then you check whether there's not really coherence, you call it alignment between what a scholar does and one of these topics, right? So I'm wondering whether there could be certain overlapping between these topics, and whether this could render the alignment greater for some scholars rather than for others.
Okay.
I'm not sure whether I've been more clear than before. But could you just provide some examples of topics that you identified?
Okay, let me go back to my screen because I'm afraid. Before I was mentioning to Leonardo different text analysis algorithm. So one is topic modeling, and the topic modeling basically work with the distribution of word, and then from the distribution of word you can infer topic. With this technique, you do not identify a topic a priori, but basically what you do is just this kind of exercise. You position words. So let's say that protein is close to serine, then protein with mouse.
Right. Okay.
In this case, if two words are synonymous, they should overlap. So they should appear with zero distance.
Right. But the green dot is a topic, correct?
The green dot is a word.
Is a word. Okay.
Is a word. Okay. So in this, the word2vec doesn't allow to identify a topic. So maybe you can identify topic with words that are agglomerated.
Okay, got it. Okay, sorry. Yeah. Okay. Sorry for having abused my role. So
no. Please.
Alessandro, sorry.
So I keep giving priority to PhD students. I think Adelia has a question.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not going to turn my cam off because there's appears to be a problem with my Wi-Fi. But basically my question is just a recap of what Masoud, Leo, Andrea, and Sandra was actually saying. Do you think the results would be different if you would have implemented nested logic?
Quick answer, no, I do not see. No. I don't see. No, why are you suspecting that there might be differences?
No, I was just thinking you could do it both first from the perspective of what kind of subject you're referring to, and second through the perspective of the nesting of the words, like the same thing that you're just describing with the proteins and etc.
Okay. Short answer would be no. Well, we could try.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so Marianna.
Yes, here I am. Okay. Thank you so much. So first of all, Fabiana, very, very interesting presentation, as all your work. Actually, I'm a big fan of your research. So yeah, this is in line with the expectation. And I don't really have question, just comments, except for one point that I might have missed. So the comparison is between Nature and Science, for what reason? I mean, why the benchmark are those two journals? And of course, I know they are super prestigious, but I was wondering if there is any other rationale behind it.
Thank you, Mariana. So we choose Nature and Science because they are a generalist top journal in STEM. I have to say that one way to improve, and I have to admit that one way to improve our analysis would be to do the same exercise with field specific journal. Let's say in physics, to consider journal like Physics A and B. The short answer is that we consider that those journals because in our opinion, they are representative for equally for all fields in STEM, but our analysis can be improved. For this reason, for instance, we exclude math because math is not well represented in Nature and Science. We exclude math also for other technical reasons because many articles with math content, they have formula, and so they are not good for the text analysis. So the next step will be to consider a specific field journal.
That's super interesting. This might just affect, you know, this what you said about interdisciplinarity and the ability to capture that aspect in the research path of the individuals. And then a very general comment about the first comment that you receive. I just suspect that this is a matter of self-selection, like labor economics, the issue of being at Stanford, and for that reason, bit on the Sloan Foundation rather than on any other minor fellowship. Because from a policy perspective, I would say that a very similar debate is also in Europe, you know, that ESRC grants only go to most prestigious or top European university rather than to minor ones. So I think it's a quite, you know, a super relevant policy debate, of course, and easy to address. I mean, I think it's just a matter of instrumental variable that you can easily do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mariana.
Thank you, Fabiana.
Okay, I have some comments on this point, but I'm going to go after Alberto and then Sandro. So Alberto, please go ahead.
Thanks, Ale, and thanks, Fabiana, and to your co-authors as well for the very nice work. I think it was very stimulating, especially when you hear presentations about economics of science. You always put yourself into the shoes of the results and try to figure out whether your work is following the pattern or not, or whatever. I have a comment for our PhD students first, and which is like point of appreciation of your work. Which is it's so great to have this kind of exercise where you have both the projects that have been successful and the projects that were not successful. These improve dramatically the possibility to get close to causal effect. So well done on finding this data.
Alberto, please, could you speak louder?
Louder?
Yeah, because I can't hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? No.
Not so much. No, I can hear you, but not so much.
Yes, we can. There's a sort of background noise, but we can hear you, Alberto.
Okay. So I'll cut the long story short, and I go to my main comment, and which partially relate with these things that we have said about. Okay, the story holds true particularly well if you work in Stanford. What happens if you work in the middle of nowhere in I don't know, Louisiana? Okay, with no disrespect for Louisiana. I was thinking about weather, for instance, and I was putting myself into the shoes of a scholar who's working in a very, for instance, teaching intensive university. Now, all your metrics make a lot of sense if the benchmark is similar, kind of a research-intensive university and so on. But imagine you work in a teaching-intensive university and you are able to do something which is original. That proves that your work is particularly good, actually is excellent, because despite the problems, you've been able to come up with something which is original. So in econometric terms, I'm pointing to like further interaction, which is between, I don't know, teaching intensive, research intensive, top uni versus non-top uni, and your measures. Because I think that your metrics would make completely different sense if you take them in a top uni versus a non-top uni. It would be much more appreciable to see like a researcher that is able to do something new, path-breaking, if they have to do 200 hours of teaching per year.
So sorry if I interrupt you, but just to understand, so you are saying if I'm in a research-intensive university and I emerge as a scholar in that university, my value is much greater than if I emerge with my research in a research-intensive university, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So, for instance, if my name, my office is close to Alessandro. Now, imagine that Alessandro, instead of having me close to him, has got a Nobel Prize. Now, finding something original for him would be much easier. But unfortunately for Alessandro, he's got Alberto close to him. So it's more difficult for him to find something which is path-breaking. Okay. In fact, I'm working as a barrier for his originality. So that's what I'm saying. Like your two metrics could maybe interacted with the quality of the university, the intensity, the research intensity of the university, to see whether they would make a different contribution to the possibility to be granted a grant. Because I see like there are two levels here. When you write a bid, you've got the institution, and I mean you're not isolated. You work in an institution. You receive support from the institution and so on. If despite the lack of support, if despite the lack of experience with that sort of granting, if despite the lack of path-breaking research, you're able to come up with something which is original, you are proving that you're particularly good at doing research. And the second point is, I mean, this story about the relevance, coherence, and so on reminds me a lot about concepts that have been around for a while, like global search, local search, exploration, exploitation, and so on and so forth. Any time we dealt with those issues, we as a community, we always attempted to stick into the specification some curvilinear effects to see whether too much coherence, is it good, or there is a threshold above which too much coherence is not good. So I was wondering whether you've tried that, or maybe that could be something that may be done in the future. But by the way, it was very, very, very nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alberto, for your comments. You're suggesting to consider also the type of industry make full of sense, and I think that it is also feasible in terms of metrics, because so far we are using the QS university rank that provide ranking by field. But provide also scores in terms of quality of teaching, etc. So we might be able to include those kind of control. For your second question about the level, yes, so far we replaced the dummy with the continuous variable. We have not tried so far the curvilinear effect. That is something that we can do. So far we tried only to interact the two dimension, but we could explore also the curvilinear effect. Thank you, Alberto.
Okay, Sandro?
Yeah. So first of all, let me tell you, Fabiana, more extensively that I really enjoyed your presentation. The paper was really good. And also, I think, very nice to be presented in this setting. As you have noticed, we have a number of PhD students and other career persons. So I think that it's very important to them to bring home even, a message apart from the analytical and scientific aspects of the paper. So thank you very much for that. I have a couple of questions and comments. I don't know. The first question is about, say, the nature of this coherence and alignment on which you focus. You, at the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned something about how the call is structured. You quoted some sentences from the call of this Sloan. My question is, can we be sure that in the call or somewhere else in the website of the foundation, there's actually nothing that prizes coherence and alignment, and therefore somehow invite applicants to somehow, force and not generally declare a degree of coherence or a degree of alignment that is, not really genuine, not really inherent to them, but rather driven by the call. This is the first question. The second question that I have is about coherence. Now, one of the things that I'm sure usually introduce sort of jump or shock or whatever in the coherence is a change in the institutions of young scholars. I mean, this is young, so they might not change institutions so often, but if it happens, as it is now a case, this could actually create an interruption in the set of topics with which they deal with. I'm wondering whether there's a chance to net out changing the affiliation of these scholars to get an idea of coherence as such. That is a kind of coherence which coherence not affected by institutional changes like the change in affiliation. And the third, not really question, is a comment. I say that I was expecting, rather than in the last slide selection story, rather than a story about venture capital, a story about social sciences, because I would like to know whether you expect that what you found for STEMs, what you found for physics, somehow extend to social sciences too, and to our own disciplines. And this is just a curiosity. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sandro, for the good question and also good comments. So the first comment about the call. So you're right, because if in the call Sloan would put some direction, there would be an endogeneity problem, in the sense that applicant strategically modify their proposal with the aim of increasing their chance to get the grant. At our knowledge, no, and we had the privilege to have also Sandra is working at the Sloan Foundation, and we have the privilege also to have to share our result with the director. They assure us that the call is fully open, and is fully open in purpose to give to this scholar the possibility to apply in any is an open call, so you can apply. It's not directionalized in any sense, and this is also the idea behind the grant. In terms of kind of call and structure of the grant, and is something related. we double check with the director of the foundation that if a reviewer are explicitly asked to give a particular attention to the content of the proposal. And this was confirmed because we were afraid that evaluators were not giving so much attention to the proposal because, for instance, I worked with other kind of grant data, and in some cases, at the end of the day, a reviewer check your CV, and they do not evaluate so much the content of the proposal. And since in this project, our idea was to say, okay, let's match the two dimension. We check at the beginning if the Sloan Foundation was the right setting, and we think that it is on this. And we had also the advantage to have an open call because nowadays I'm realizing that moving to the Netherlands, many projects are also specific in the topic of the call. So you are right that a researcher often, if you think also to Horizon 2020, the calls are with a specific, basically with a specific topic. Second question about changing affiliation. We have the advantage to deal with young scholars. So basically, in the majority of the case, they have experience with two affiliation, the PhD affiliation plus the current affiliation. It would be interesting to add an additional control for that in theory should be captured by career specialization. So basically, what we don't know if the career specialization is driven by a personal choice of the applicant or it is driven by the affiliation change. What we could do is to add a simple dummy, PhD university equal to affiliation. At least we could flag those scholars that moved. And last question. Yeah, it would be interesting to know what is going on in our discipline. Working in economics of science since a while, unfortunately, there are fewer studies in our discipline with respect to stem cell because it's not easy to retrieve our outcome. And in our outcome, there are longer lags between the starting of the project and the publication time that in STEM field. So this is why the majority of the studies in economic of science are in the STEM field. But yeah, sure, it would be great to have this possibility to extend. So thank you, Sandro.
Okay, Fabiana, thank you, Sandro, thank you, Fabiana. I also have a question, more a comment. And I took notes, Fabiana, but I will try to start from one of the most important implication of your study, that is be novel but not too novel. I think this is a strong claim, and but I see in this statement also some limitations, not in the study, but as a researcher. I mean, the idea is that this concept, of course, maximizes the probability of getting the fund, okay, winning the grant. But it might not be sufficient to push on the frontier, okay? So it might be penalizing for most promising or the most, say, ambitious projects. No? So the idea here is that in the study, all is captured by the threshold, I think. So the threshold is one of the key parameters to capture somehow this path dependence, okay? So something that depends on the past and that can determine the probability of winning the grant according to similarity, this similarity mechanism. So my question is, to what extent this path dependence can affect the trajectory of the research proposal, and at the same time, this also determines the probability of success. So basically, we are speaking of selection into treatment, and I'm referring to something similar to what Marianna was saying before, the kind of assortative matching mechanism like in labor economics literature that can determine the selection process. And so, yeah, let's see. So maybe you can, given that the claim is very strong and the topic is very important, maybe you can try also to run some additional regression to try to account for this potential selection mechanism, like pre-matching procedure, or yeah, the ideal would be to find an ID, but I know that it is not an easy task. So yeah. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alessandro. So yeah, good suggestion, and we will investigate further this aspect. A general thought about the novelty. There are other studies that found that novelty is often penalized by funding agency because at the end of the day, funding agency tend to be risk adverse toward novelty. I have to say that they are also realizing that, and so there are changing. They are trying to change this trend, and they are dedicating specific programs to what is so-called risk science. For instance, I read recently that UK is launching an agency, high risk, high reward program, and they want to identify and sponsor this type of research. And probably one of the way to promote risk science is to dedicate to reserve quota, let's say, for this kind of research. And for the econometrics, yes, we will try to work.
Yeah, but I really like the method you identified to capture this the similarity distance. Mm-hmm. So I think you just need to. I read the paper, so I know that you provide you carry out several robustness checks on the thresholds, but maybe you might try to make this threshold less discretionary, like using.
Yeah, this is why we moved to the continuous measure, because we recognized we were afraid about the weakness of having this threshold. This is why we tried also the continuous variables.
Okay. Okay. We are perfectly on time. It's 12 o'clock, so I think we can close here if there are no other questions.
So thank you so much to everyone again for the attention and for having 2 full hours dedicated. So feel free to reach me by email, and again, I really hope to see you personally somewhere soon.
Sure, Fabiana. Let me say thank you once again for accepting our invitation. Thank you to all the attendees here and on YouTube channel. And I would just like to remember for the next our meeting on March 17 with Antonio Paez. And so have a good day, and thank you once again for attending the webinar.
Thank you so
Fabiana,
much.
spero di vederti presto, ok? Hope
Sì,
to see you
anch'io.
again, face to face.
Sì, a presto.
Grazie.
Grazie.
Buona giornata, buona giornata.
Grazie Fabiana, ciao.
Ciao.